Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Afonte, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Black Panther Party. So, the Black Panther Party has always been an important part of the United States' racial past, and a key group that, through the means of racist rhetoric of white men and women, has been all but forgotten in your histories or your high school's textbook civil rights section. Or even worse, made out to be a group of individuals who incited violence against whites in order to disrupt institutionalized racism and white supremacy. It is clear now, after taking this class, that the racist rhetoric of those that condemn the Black Panthers now and in the past can be taken entirely from the ideas of scientific racism. I will first begin by looking at the history of the party, the impacts the party had on other revolutionary groups and the American people, and I'll finish by talking about the role scientific racism plays in the racist rhetoric that surrounds this group. First, a little history about the U.S. prior to the formation of the Black Panther Party. After the Civil War ended and the emancipation of slavery, white Americans were forced to deal with the idea that Black Americans were not theirs to control. In order to try and prevent assimilation, hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan were formed, who spent most of their time terrorizing Black men and women, often lynching them merely for entertainment, and also to keep the idea that whites were superior alive. This ideology can be traced back to the idea that free Black people were not able to survive as free people and were instead expected to go extinct. An idea that most scientists of the post-emancipation time agreed with. The government seemed to ignore or even support these ideas, which led to extreme instances of police brutality and the denial of basic human rights. Because of these injustices, the civil rights movement began with Martin Luther King Jr. at the forefront. He preached nonviolent philosophies and protested peacefully. Unfortunately, this did not stop the police from beating and brutalizing during the protests and continuing to kill Black Americans. On the left, I have pictures of the famous March on Washington, as well as pictures of the police and police dogs attacking a demonstrator. Additionally, the Vietnam War began, and with that, all Americans began to become angry and openly hostile to the established order. Many Black Americans felt that nonviolence could not always help, and that Black Americans needed to know how to defend themselves from police brutality because the government did not seem to care. Oakland, California has been a city known for their hostile treatment of Black Americans by police, so to stop this violence and to protect the residents of their communities from police brutality, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party in 1966. They later began the call to arm all African Americans in order for self-defense. While there were other African American cultural nationalist organizations, the Black Panthers set themselves apart by trying to ally themselves with non-racist and progressive whites, as well as other groups promoting the advancement of people of color. The Black Panther Party has only been known by average history books or mainstream news sources as a group that incited violence. However, this could be farther from the truth. The Black Panther Party was based on activism and community, with self-defense, not violence, being their goal. The Black Panther Party had many impacts and accomplishments. The event that brought them into the national discussion was the instance where the members marched to the California Capitol in Sacramento, fully armed, in order to proclaim their right to bear arms and protest a gun control bill that they perceived to be a political maneuver to thwart the organization's effort to combat police brutality. While this was most likely the most talked about accomplishment of the party, this, however, was not the most important thing they did. Their real impact was with their survival programs and community services. Those services included legal aid, ambulance services, education, and medical services such as tuberculosis testing. The most important thing they did was the free breakfast for children program. At this time, and still today, Black Americans were suffering from poverty and hunger, and the free breakfast program helped to feed at least 20,000 school children in the 1968 to 1969 school year. This program was soon adopted by the government as a federal program. But even as they accomplished so much, because they were a group of supposed revolutionary Black Americans, they were seen as a threat to the deep institutionalized white supremacy the country had. This is where the FBI and COINTELPRO came into the picture. As stated from Documentary Now, COINTELPRO is an acronym for the FBI's counterintelligence program, which was used in the 1960s to monitor, manipulate, and disrupt social and political movements in the United States. Dr. Martin Luther King, the Black Panthers, anti-Vietnam War activists, and the American Indian movement were among the program's targets. Aside from COINTELPRO, other factors did lead to the demise of the Black Panther Party, such as leadership issues, but most all of the problems the party had stemmed from the actions of COINTELPRO. J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI decided that the Black Panthers were a threat and should be labeled as a communist organization. When faced with the accomplishments they achieved, such as the free breakfast program, Hoover stated that it was merely propaganda by the party. Hoover's goal to destroy the party was laid out in these exact terms from a memo of his. 1. Prevent a coalition of militant black nationalist groups. 2. Prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant nationalist movement. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Elijah Muhammad all aspired to this position. 3. Prevent violence on the part of black nationalist groups. 4. Prevent militant black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability by discrediting them. And 5. Prevent the long-range growth of militant black nationalist organizations, especially among youth. In order to do this destruction, the FBI used agent provocateurs, sabotage, misinformation, and lethal force to eviscerate the national organization. One such example of this is from a website devoted to Black Panther leader Assata Shakur. The instance described was a covert effort in Southern California by the FBI to, in quotes, create further dissension in the ranks of the Black Panther Party. They did this by exacerbating a supposed gang war between the Black Panthers and a group called the United Slaves. This war led to 4 members of the Black Panther Party being killed. Evidence that shows the FBI had a hand in these gang wars can be seen in a letter from a special agent to the FBI headquarters that stated, in quotes, "The Los Angeles Division is aware of the mutually hostile feelings harbored between the organizations, and the first opportunity to capitalize on the situation will be maximized. It is intended that the U.S. United Slaves, Inc. will be appropriately and discreetly advised of the time and location of the Black Panther Party activities, in order that the two organizations might be brought together and thus grant nature the opportunity to take her due course." End quotes. In my final works slide, I have the reference for the website I received this story from. The Black Panther Party threatened the fabric of racist American ideology and in turn was destroyed by the government. For its short run as a successful organization, the Black Panthers had a lasting impact. They influenced groups who had very similar interests, such as those wanting to help their communities, fight institutionalized racism, and protest and stop police brutality. The Black Panthers have inspired many groups, including the Puerto Rican Young Lords on the East Coast, the Chinese Red Guard from San Francisco, and the Brown Berets/Chicano movement, and more recently, Black Lives Matter, a national movement. I will focus mainly on the Brown Berets and Black Lives Matter. Being centered in California, the Brown Berets were influenced greatly by the other primarily Californian group, the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers had their own newspaper that used visual images in their stories to inform people, and the Brown Berets used this idea as well by creating their own publication called La Causa, which informed people on the latest news surrounding politics, activism, racism, and police brutality. Like the Black Panthers, the Brown Berets organized to protest the police brutality against Chicanos. And just as the Black Panthers met their demise, the same tactics used by the FBI to infiltrate them were used against the Brown Berets to portray their cause and their people as dangerous. Below are some images of the Brown Berets. The first image shows a sign for a restaurant that states they will not serve Spanish or Mexicans. This picture used as a call to action for Brown Berets to stand up and fight back. The second picture shows a group of Brown Berets posing for a group picture, some armed, just as the Black Panthers. And the last picture is of a Brown Beret standing in between 2 members of the Black Panther Party. The other group that is seen to have similarities to the Black Panthers is the more recent movement, Black Lives Matter. This movement began as a response to the killing of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, a kid who was unarmed and posed no threat. While this was not necessarily a case of police brutality, many other instances came about which strengthened the movement and created the comparisons to the Black Panthers in the way that they use visual imagery in the form of protest, die-ins, and cell phone videos of instances of police brutality to support their cause, just as the Black Panthers did, without clearly the use of cell phones. The image on the right is by Black Panther Party artist Emory Douglas. The first image is from 1976, and the second image has been updated by him in 2015 to reflect the Black Lives Matter cause, showing larger scales of justice. It is clear all of these groups portrays the message that Black lives or lives of people of color matter just as much as white lives, and that people should not be subjected to police brutality and an unfair government treatment because of the color of their skin. But people have always had a problem with Black Americans fighting for their right to be equal, and people continue to have a problem with it. This can be explained simply by the fact that people who think this way are racist. But it is incredibly important to realize that the real problem is that racism has been perpetuated by science and biases by key scientific figures, and this ideology has become the system of institutionalized racism that cannot be ignored. Taking a look at the different racist rhetoric that surrounds the Black Panthers, it is important to look at some of the authors of that time and examine how they perceived the group and how their ideas about racial hierarchy reflects the views about the Black Panther Party's goals. In the book Toward a Revolutionary Rhetoric, Arthur Smith states, the early rhetoric of Black Revolution was characterized by aggression against whites who were portrayed as the conveyors of racist attitudes and values. Simultaneously, this rhetoric tried to create Black unity. Externally, the outlook was aggressive. Internally, the search was for unity. Little attempt was made to appeal to white America in the traditional rhetorical context. The Black revolutionists did not seek their approval or acceptance of their ideas by the white audience. Contrarily, they seemed to seek rejection by the white audience. This idea perpetuates the idea that Black Americans must rely on white America, and to rebel was purely just aggression and violence, rather than a normal response to the conditions they had been subjected to. However, it is clear that even as our country has progressed away from these ideas, supposedly, we still seem to make it clear that any instance where Black Americans work to protest and stop the injustices they face, they are made to seem like their grievances are not valid and their actions are merely, again, just aggression and violence. This can be seen in a video by Tommy Lahren, a journalist, in air quotes, from The Blaze, who responded to Beyonce's Black Panther-inspired Super Bowl performance.
Welcome back for some final thoughts tonight. First it was hands up, don't shoot. Then it was burning down buildings and looting drugstores, all the way to Oscars So White. And now even the Super Bowl halftime show has become a way to politicize and advance the notion that Black lives matter more. This isn't about equality. This is about ramrodding an aggressive agenda down our throats and using fame and entertainment value to do so. Beyonce, really? What is the political message here? What is it they are trying to convey here? A salute to what? A group that used violence and intimidation to advance not racial equality, but an overthrow of white domination? The Black Panthers, for those who don't know, were critical of Martin Luther King's non-violent civil rights movement. They didn't believe in change through peace. They promoted violence instead. So congratulations, Beyonce. You made your statement. You should be proud of yourself. The Super Bowl, the most watched event on television. A game that brings Americans of every color, background, and political party together. A game where Black fans cheer next to white fans. A game where teammates work together as one, regardless of race. A celebration of diversity rooted in a common bond. But forget that. These privileged Hollywood entertainment types are really something. Beyonce didn't reference the Black Panthers to bring about some kind of positive change. She did it to get attention. Good for you. You made headlines. You, just like President Obama, Jada Pinkett Smith, Al Sharpton, and so many others, just can't let America heal. Keep ripping off the historical Band-Aid. Why be a cultural leader when you can play the victim, right? Guess what, Beyonce? White people like your music too. White people buy your songs on iTunes, memorize your lyrics, and admire your talent and beauty. Little white girls want to be like you just as little black girls do. But instead of recognizing that, you would rather perpetuate the great battle of the races. Your husband was a drug dealer. For 14 years, he sold crack cocaine. Talk about protecting Black neighborhoods. Start at home. Those are my final thoughts. Thanks for watching. God bless you, God bless America, and take care.
As you can see, Miss Lahren is clearly uninformed about the Black Panthers, and instead of trying to understand how Black Americans are subjected to injustices, She ignores this and instead insists that everything is post-racial and that these black celebrities are merely just trying to divide people. Rhetoric constantly used by politicians and people that just don't want to accept that we're not a post-racial society. And to add more fuel to the fire, she mentions how Jay-Z, a successful recording artist, used to deal drugs, clearly making him the problem to black communities and not her racist comments. Now comes the part where I explain why I believe this racist rhetoric has existed around the Black Panther Party and why it still persists today. I believe this can all be rooted in the ideas of criminal anthropology. In the late 1800s, scientist Cesar Lombroso created a theory of the criminal man in the profession of criminal anthropology. The main takeaways of this theory was that criminality was innate and hereditary, and that it could be explained by not only behaviors but appearance. Lombroso stated that criminality was described by apish and savage behavior, and that criminals could bear anatomical signs of their apishness. The connection seems clear now, as for almost the entire history of racism in the world, there has been the comparison of black people to apes. There are pictures all over the internet. It is not hard to find an image comparing the president and the first lady to apes. Having this comparison be so ingrained into American society and be continually justified by scientific racism, it is clear why the tactics of the Black Panther Party became so immediately feared by the racist right and even the supposed non-racist white moderates. While media can portray these ideas that the Black Panthers were extremely violent, the history does not seem to support the claim, meaning that the ideas of Lombroso and criminal anthropology could explain why it is these ideas about violence and criminality still seem to tarnish the accomplishments of the Black Panther Party, and now do the same to the Black Lives Matter movement. It is the responsibility of everybody to educate people about how these stereotypes came to be and how to combat them, as well as to bring a more accurate history of the Black Panther Party into the world for future generations. Thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I hope this inspires you to go out and learn more about these organizations and movements and how racism affects their history. Thank you.